Migration. Want to stay in hotels? Digital ID required for guest registration. And they don't call it mandatory, they call it enhancing security. They say digital ID prevents terrorism, reduces crime, improves public safety, so technically you can opt out, you just can't move freely. And they do it gradually enough that most people won't notice the trap closing, incrementally enough that each step seems reasonable, systematically enough that by the time you realize what happened, reversal is impossible. Each phase is implemented over months, each requirement is introduced with justification, each restriction is framed as improvement, each limitation is presented as protection, and each step makes the next step easier to justify and harder to resist. Year 1. Government services require digital ID. Seems reasonable. Government needs to verify citizens. Digital ID is more efficient than paper documents. Most people accept it. Year 2. Banking requires digital ID. Seems reasonable. Banks need to comply with regulations. Digital ID prevents money laundering. Most people accept it. Year 3. Healthcare requires digital ID. Seems reasonable. Hospitals need accurate patient records. Digital ID improves safety. Most people accept it. Year 4. Education requires digital ID. Seems reasonable. Schools need to prevent fraud. Digital ID ensures legitimate students. Most people accept it. Year 5. Employment requires digital ID. Seems reasonable. Employers need to verify workers. Digital ID protects rights. Most people accept it. Year 6. Travel requires digital ID. Seems reasonable. Security agencies need to track movement. Digital ID prevents crime. Most people accept it. And by year 6, opting out is impossible. Because opting out means no government services, no banking, no healthcare, no education, no employment, no travel. Opting out means complete exclusion from modern society. Opting out means becoming invisible, unverifiable, unable to participate in anything. The trap is complete. The system is mandatory in everything but name, and reversal is impossible because every sector of society now depends on it. This is the choice facing Africa right now. Will you surrender biometric data for convenience? Will you trade privacy for efficiency? Will you accept surveillance for services? Will you choose dependency over sovereignty? These are not hypothetical questions. These are immediate decisions being made by leaders across Africa, and most are choosing wrong. Most are signing agreements. Most are implementing systems. Most are surrendering sovereignty. Let me tell you about a meeting I had last month. Regional summit. 15 African heads of state. Closed session. No media, no observers. Just presidents talking honestly about challenges we face. The topic turned to digital identity. 3 presidents praised their implementation, talked about efficiency gains, celebrated enrollment numbers, highlighted international approval. They were proud of their progress, proud of their modernization, proud of their systems. I asked one of them a question. Simple question. Direct question. Can you shut down the system if you want to? He looked confused. Why would I want to shut it down? It's working perfectly. I said, I didn't ask if you want to. I asked if you can. If tomorrow you decided the system isn't serving your interests, could you shut it down without destroying your government's functionality? He paused, thought about it, then said, well, it would be complicated. Many services depend on it now. Banks use it, hospitals use it, schools use it. Shutting it down would disrupt everything. I said, so you can't shut it down? He said, technically I could, but it would be catastrophic. I said, then you don't control the system. The system controls you. You've created a dependency you can't escape. You've surrendered sovereignty you can't recover. You've built a trap you can't exit. The room went quiet. Because every president who implemented these systems knew I was right. They knew they couldn't exit. They knew they were trapped. They just hadn't admitted it out loud. Another president spoke up. But Captain Traoré, every modern country has these systems. Digital identity is the future. We can't resist progress. I said, every modern country that has these systems controlled by foreign entities is trapped in dependency. That's not progress. That's submission. And we can resist by building our own systems. Systems we control, systems we own, systems we can exit if we choose. He said, but we don't have the capacity to build our own. I said, we didn't have capacity because we never tried to build it. We accepted that we couldn't build, so we never built. We believed we needed them, so we never developed ourselves. We assumed dependency was inevitable, so we never pursued independence. But Burkina Faso built our own system, with our own engineers, on our own infrastructure, under our own control, and it works. And it's better, because we own it. The room stayed quiet, because I'd said what everyone knew but nobody wanted to admit, that the systems they implemented aren't serving their interests, that the agreements they signed surrendered sovereignty, that the dependencies they created can't be escaped, that they chose convenience over control and now they're trapped, because they're told this is inevitable, they're told this is the future, they're told resistance is futile, they're told every developed country has these systems, they're told Africa needs to modernize, and they believe it. Because they want to believe it, because they want to be modern, because they want to be developed, because they want international approval. But they're not told the full truth. They're not told about control mechanisms embedded in these systems. They're not told about surveillance capabilities built into infrastructure. They're not told about dependency these systems create. They're not told about sovereignty these agreements surrender. Let me tell you what they're not told. Let me expose what the promotional materials don't mention. Let me reveal what the contracts bury in technical language. They're not told that the algorithms analyzing their citizens' data are proprietary. Black boxes they can't audit. Systems they can't inspect. Processes they can't verify. They're told the algorithms are sophisticated, advanced, cutting edge, but they're not told they're also opaque, unaccountable, and potentially discriminatory. They're not told that the data sharing provisions in the contracts allow the implementing organizations to share data with third parties for purposes defined by the implementing organizations. They're told data will be protected, secured, encrypted, but they're not told it will also be shared, analyzed, and used for purposes beyond what's stated publicly. They're not told that the liability clauses in the agreements indemnify the implementing organizations against all claims arising from data breaches, unauthorized access, or system failures. They're told the systems are secure, the data is protected, the infrastructure is robust. But they're not told that when breaches happen, and they will happen, the implementing organizations bear no legal responsibility. They're not told that the exit provisions in the contracts require governments to maintain the system for a minimum period, typically 10 to 15 years, and that early termination requires paying penalties equal to the total value of the agreement plus projected future costs. They're told the partnership is flexible, the terms are negotiable, the relationship is collaborative, but they're not told that exit is financially catastrophic and practically impossible. They're not told that the governance structures established by the agreements give implementing organizations veto power over changes to the system, modifications to the terms, or alterations to the data sharing provisions. They're told they'll have representation on governance boards, input into decision-making, voice in system management, but they're not told they'll be outvoted on every decision that matters. They're not told that every country that implemented comprehensive digital identity controlled by foreign entities discovered they can't exit without catastrophic disruption. They're not told that efficiency comes at the cost of autonomy. They're not told that convenience comes at the price of control. Kenya discovered this. 6 million citizens enrolled, system working efficiently. Then they wanted to modify data sharing provisions, wanted to restrict what information could be accessed by implementing organizations, wanted to require explicit consent for each data request. The implementing organization said no, said it would reduce system efficiency, said it would undermine the integrated approach, said it would violate the agreement. Kenya backed down, because they couldn't afford to fight. Because they couldn't risk system shutdown, because they were trapped. Nigeria discovered this, pushing mandatory enrollment numbers climbing rapidly. Then they wanted to audit the algorithms, wanted to verify they weren't discriminating against certain populations, wanted to inspect how risk scores were calculated. The implementing organization said no, said the algorithms were proprietary, said auditing would compromise security, said it would violate intellectual property protections. Nigeria backed down because they couldn't afford confrontation, because they couldn't risk losing international support, because they were trapped. Ghana discovered this. Digital ID linked to mobile money, millions of transactions flowing through the system. Then they wanted local data storage, wanted servers on Ghanaian soil under Ghanaian law, wanted to reduce dependency on foreign infrastructure. The implementing organization said no, said it would increase costs, said it would reduce efficiency, said it would require renegotiating the entire agreement. Ghana backed down because they couldn't afford the expense, because they couldn't risk service disruption, because they were trapped. They're not told what I'm telling you right now, that this is not about technology, this is about power, not about efficiency, about control, not about development, about domination. I'm telling you because someone needs to tell you, because someone needs to expose what's really happening, because someone needs to warn you before it's too late, because someone needs to show you alternatives exist, because someone needs to prove resistance is possible. I've seen the contracts they don't want you to see. I've read the clauses they don't want you to read. I've asked the questions they don't want you to ask. I've understood the implications they don't want you to understand. I've resisted the pressure they don't want you to resist. And I'm still standing. Burkina Faso is still sovereign. Our citizens' data is still under our control. We proved it's possible. We demonstrated it's achievable. We showed it's better. When they came to me with their Universal Digital Identity Initiative, I read all 73 pages. I questioned every clause. I challenged every assumption. I refused every term that compromised sovereignty. And when they wouldn't negotiate, I walked away. And when they applied pressure, I resisted. And when they threatened consequences, I prepared alternatives. And we built our own system. Not their system adapted to our needs, but our system designed for our sovereignty. Not their infrastructure with local branding, but our infrastructure under our control. Not their platform with our data, but our platform serving our citizens. We hired Burkinabe engineers. We trained them in sovereign technology principles. We taught them that systems encode values, that infrastructure determines independence, that code is political. We created a generation of technologists who build for Africa, not for foreign corporations. We built data centers on Burkinabe soil. We installed servers we own. We established security protocols we control. We created infrastructure we can audit, inspect, modify, and if necessary, shut down. We built the physical foundation of digital sovereignty. We wrote code that prioritizes privacy over surveillance. We designed systems where citizens own their data, not governments or corporations. We created platforms where enrollment is voluntary, consent is required, and exit is possible. We built technology that serves people instead of controlling them. And it works. 5 million Burkinabe citizens enrolled voluntarily, not because they were forced, not because they had no choice, but because they understood the system serves them. Because they trust that their data is protected, because they know they can opt out if they choose. 0 data breaches in 3 years of operation. Not because breaches are impossible, but because we control the infrastructure. We audit the systems. We monitor the access. We enforce the protocols. Because sovereignty enables security. 0 unauthorized access in 3 years of operation. Not because people don't try, but because we control who has access. We verify every request. We audit every query. We track every use. Because ownership enables accountability. Complete national sovereignty over our citizens' identities. Not partial, not conditional, not subject to foreign approval. Complete, total, absolute. Because we built it ourselves, we own it ourselves, we control it ourselves. To every African citizen reading this, ask your government about digital identity programs. Ask who controls the data. Ask where it's stored. Ask who has access. Ask what happens if you opt out. Ask about exit provisions. Ask who wrote the terms. Ask who benefits from implementation. Don't accept vague answers. Don't accept reassurances.
I might even
Don't
notice.
accept promises. Demand specifics. Demand documentation. Demand transparency. Your government says the data is secure. Ask where the servers are located. Ask who has physical access. Ask what encryption is used. Ask who holds the keys. Ask what happens if servers are seized by foreign governments. Ask what protections exist against foreign intelligence agencies. Ask for specifics, not assurances. Your government says the system is efficient? Ask at what cost. Ask what sovereignty was surrendered. Ask what dependencies were created. Ask what exit provisions exist. Ask what happens if the system fails. Ask what alternatives remain. Ask for analysis, not marketing. Your government says citizens are satisfied? Ask who was surveyed. Ask what questions were asked. Ask what options were presented. Ask whether dissatisfied citizens could opt out. Ask whether concerns were documented. Ask whether complaints were addressed. Ask for data, not anecdotes. Ask to see the contract, not the summary, not the brochure, the actual contract, the legal document, the technical specifications, the implementation protocol, all of it. Because that's where truth lives, that's where real terms are written, that's where the trap is hidden. And if they won't show you, if they say it's confidential, if they claim it's too technical, if they insist you should trust them, then you know something is wrong. Then you know they're hiding something. Because legitimate agreements don't need to be hidden. Sovereign systems don't need to be secret. Beneficial programs don't need to avoid scrutiny. If your government can't show you the terms, it's because the terms reveal what they don't want you to know. To every African leader reading this, understand what you're signing before you sign it. Read the entire agreement. Consult independent experts. Consider long-term implications. Think about sovereignty, not just efficiency. I know the pressure you're facing. I know the incentives they're offering. I know the threats they're making. I've experienced all of it. I've faced all of it. I've resisted all of it. They'll offer you hundreds of millions in funding. They'll promise infrastructure development. They'll guarantee technical assistance. They'll provide training programs, they'll deliver equipment, they'll deploy experts, everything you need to implement their system, everything except sovereignty. Let me tell you exactly what they deliver. Let me show you what comes in those shipments. Let me expose what arrives with those experts. They deliver servers, pre-configured, pre-programmed, preloaded with software you didn't choose, operating systems you didn't select, security protocols you didn't design. They tell you it's turnkey, ready to deploy, plug and play. But what they don't tell you is those servers phone home. They don't tell you those systems report back. They don't tell you those configurations include backdoors, remote access, monitoring capabilities you never authorized. They deliver scanners, biometric equipment, fingerprint readers, facial recognition cameras, iris scanners, voice capture devices, all manufactured by their companies, all programmed with their software, all connected to their networks. They tell you it's state-of-the-art, latest technology, best available equipment. But what they don't tell you is who else has access. They don't tell you what other governments can tap into those systems. They don't tell you what intelligence agencies have backdoor access to equipment manufactured in their countries. They deliver software, licensed, not owned, proprietary, not open source, controlled by them, not by you. They tell you it's sophisticated, advanced, cutting edge. But what they don't tell you is you can't modify it, you can't audit it, you can't verify what it actually does beyond what they claim it does, you can't inspect the code. You can't examine the algorithms, you can't understand the processes, you just have to trust them, and trust is what they're asking you to give while taking everything you have. They deploy experts, technical advisors, system administrators, training specialists, implementation managers, all employed by them, all loyal to them, all reporting to them. They embed themselves in your government. They sit in your ministries, they access your systems, they handle your data, they train your staff to depend on them, and when they leave, and eventually they will leave, your systems stop working. Your staff can't maintain what they don't understand. Your government can't operate what they didn't build. This is what they deliver. Dependency disguised as assistance. Control disguised as capacity building. Colonization disguised as cooperation. Everything you need to implement their system. Everything except sovereignty. They'll threaten to withdraw existing aid. They'll delay pending loans. They'll suspend development programs. They'll remove you from conferences. They'll exclude you from initiatives. They'll isolate you diplomatically. Everything they can do to force compliance. Everything except respecting your decision. I know because I experienced it. Every single threat, every form of pressure, every method of coercion. 2 weeks after I refused their digital ID system, the World Bank called. Our infrastructure loan, $400 million, approved 6 months earlier, signed and sealed, suddenly had problems. Technical problems, procedural problems, governance problems. They needed additional assessments. They needed updated documentation. They needed new guarantees. They needed time to review our commitment to international standards. I asked what standards. They said digital governance standards. I asked what that meant. They said countries implementing comprehensive digital identity systems demonstrate stronger governance frameworks. I asked if my loan was being held hostage to force digital ID implementation. They said no, of course not. These are separate issues evaluated independently, but they couldn't ignore the correlation between digital identity adoption and governance quality. I said that's extortion with bureaucratic language. They said that's an unfortunate characterization of a legitimate assessment process. I said call it whatever makes you sleep at night, but I see it for what it is, punishment for refusing to surrender sovereignty. 1 month later, the International Monetary Fund suspended our credit line, the one we used to stabilize currency during market volatility, the one that prevented inflation from destroying our economy during external shocks, the one that gave us breathing room when commodity prices collapsed. Gone. Suspended pending review of our macroeconomic policies and commitment to structural reforms. I asked what reforms. They said modernization of government systems, including digital infrastructure and identity management. I asked if this was retaliation for refusing their digital ID program. They said no. These decisions are based on technical criteria and economic indicators, but digital identity is increasingly recognized as essential infrastructure for modern economies. I said you're punishing my people because I won't give you control over their data. They said we're encouraging best practices and international standards. I said you're enforcing compliance through economic coercion.
Yep.
They said we prefer to call it incentive alignment. 2 months later, the European Union redirected our aid package, 500 million euros, over 3 years. Schools, hospitals, roads, water systems. Projects already planned, already designed, already budgeted. Suddenly redirected to other countries. Countries that were more aligned with EU priorities. Countries that demonstrated stronger commitment to governance reforms. Countries that implemented comprehensive digital identity systems. I called the EU representative. I said you're taking food from hungry children because I won't surrender sovereignty. He said that's not how we would characterize it. I said then how would you characterize taking away funding for schools and hospitals because I refuse to implement your surveillance system? He said the EU has limited resources and must prioritize countries demonstrating commitment to shared values and modern governance standards. I said shared values meaning surrender to your control. Modern governance meaning submission to your systems. He said we prefer to call it partnership and cooperation. I said call it whatever helps you justify stealing from poor people to punish their president for refusing to betray them. 3 months later, I was uninvited from the African Development Summit, the one where I was scheduled to present our agricultural reforms, the one where we were supposed to showcase our education initiatives, the one where other African leaders would see what we accomplished without surrendering sovereignty. Suddenly, space was limited. Priorities had shifted. They needed to focus on countries implementing comprehensive development frameworks. I asked what frameworks. They said integrated approaches including digital infrastructure, identity management, and data governance systems. I asked if this was punishment for building our own sovereign digital ID instead of implementing theirs. They said no, it's about ensuring productive use of limited conference time by focusing on countries pursuing internationally recognized best practices. I said you're silencing me because my example threatens your narrative. They said we're curating content to maximize value for participants. I said you're preventing other African leaders from seeing that alternatives exist, that resistance is possible, that sovereignty can be maintained. They said we're managing a conference, not suppressing speech. I said you're doing both and you know it. 4 months later, international NGOs operating in Burkina Faso started receiving notices. Their funding from European sources was under review, their projects were being evaluated, their partnerships were being assessed, all because they operated in a country that didn't meet international standards for digital governance and identity management. The NGOs panicked. They came to me. They said their education programs would shut down, their healthcare projects would collapse, their agricultural initiatives would end. Thousands of beneficiaries would lose services, all because of decisions I made about digital identity systems. I told them the truth. You're being used as leverage. Your work is being held hostage. Your beneficiaries are being punished, not because of anything you did, not because of anything they did, but because I refused to surrender sovereignty, because I wouldn't give foreign entities control over Burkinabe citizens' data, because I chose independence over dependency. They asked what they should do. I said, fight back, expose this, tell your donors that using humanitarian aid as political leverage is unconscionable. Tell them that punishing poor people to pressure their president is immoral. Tell them that holding children's education hostage to force digital ID implementation is evil. Some did, most didn't, because they needed the funding, because they feared losing access, because they chose survival over principle, and I don't blame them. Because that's what this system does. It forces everyone to choose between complicity and collapse. This is everything they can do to force compliance. Everything except respecting your decision. And I'm telling you, it's possible to say no. It's possible to build alternatives. It's possible to maintain sovereignty while pursuing development. It's possible to modernize without surrendering control. But you have to be willing to read contracts carefully, ask hard questions, reject terms that compromise sovereignty, walk away from deals that create dependency, face economic pressure, endure diplomatic isolation, accept international criticism. I read every page of their 73-page agreement, not the executive summary, not the promotional materials, every single page, every clause, every provision, every term, and I found what they buried, what they hid, what they hoped I wouldn't notice. Page 47, Section 6, Subsection 3. All biometric data will be processed through centralized servers operated by the primary technical partner for quality assurance and system integrity purposes. Translation: your citizens' data goes to their servers, not yours, theirs. Page 52, Section 8, Subsection 1. The administering organization maintains perpetual access rights to all enrolled data for audit, security, and improvement purposes. Translation: they can access your citizens' data forever, for any reason they define as legitimate, without your permission. Page 63, Section 11, Subsection 4. Participating governments indemnify implementing partners against all claims arising from data breaches, unauthorized access, system failures, or other security incidents. Translation: when your citizens' data gets stolen, and it will get stolen, you're legally responsible, not them, you. Page 68, Section 13, Subsection 2. Early termination of this agreement requires payment of liquidated damages equal to the total agreement value plus projected costs through the original term. Translation: if you want out, you pay them everything they would have made if you stayed, plus penalties. Exit is financially catastrophic. Page 71, Section 14, Subsection 5. All disputes arising from this agreement shall be resolved through arbitration in accordance with rules established by the International Chamber of Commerce, with proceedings conducted in Geneva, Switzerland. Translation: if you have problems, you don't go to your courts, you go to their courts, in their country, under their rules. Where you'll lose. This is what I found by reading carefully. This is what they hoped I wouldn't find. This is what most African leaders never see, because they don't read the whole contract. They read the summary. They trust the experts. They believe the promises. And they sign away sovereignty without understanding what they signed. I asked hard questions. Questions they didn't want asked. Questions that exposed their system. Questions that revealed their control. I asked who owns the data. They said the citizen. I asked who has custody. They said the administering organization. I asked what's the difference between ownership and custody if the owner can't access, control, or delete their own data without permission from the custodian. They couldn't answer that. I asked where the servers are. They said distributed across multiple jurisdictions. I asked which jurisdictions specifically. They said primarily North America and Europe. I asked why not Africa. They said infrastructure capacity. I asked why you're not building capacity here instead of taking our data there. They couldn't answer that. I asked who has access. They said only authorized personnel. I asked who authorizes them. They said the governance board. I asked who controls the governance board. They said multi-stakeholder representation. I asked how many African representatives. They said proportional to participation. I asked so we're outvoted on decisions about our own citizens' data. They couldn't answer that. I rejected terms that compromised sovereignty, every single one, every clause that gave them control, every provision that created dependency, every term that surrendered independence. They said I was being unreasonable. I said I was being sovereign. They said I was rejecting progress. I said I was rejecting colonization. They said I was harming my people. I said I was protecting my people from you. I walked away from deals that created dependency. The World Bank loan with digital ID conditions, the IMF credit line with governance reform requirements, the EU aid package with modern standards expectations. All of it. Every dollar that came with strings attached to sovereignty. They said I was choosing poverty over prosperity. I said I was choosing independence over submission. They said my people would suffer. I said my people would suffer more under permanent dependency than temporary hardship. They said I was being stubborn. I said I was being responsible. And then I faced economic pressure. Real pressure. Serious pressure. Loans denied. Credit suspended. Aid redirected. Projects canceled. Funding withdrawn. Everything they threatened, they delivered. Our infrastructure development slowed. Our currency became volatile. Our budget tightened. Our options narrowed. Our room to maneuver shrank. And people noticed. People asked questions. People wondered if I made the right choice. I endured diplomatic isolation. Conferences I wasn't invited to. Summits I was excluded from. Meetings I wasn't included in. Initiatives I wasn't part of. The international community made clear that refusing their systems meant exclusion from their circles. Other African leaders stopped calling. Regional organizations stopped consulting. International forums stopped inviting. The message was clear. Comply or be isolated. Surrender or be excluded. Submit or be alone. I accepted international criticism, media articles calling me backward, opinion pieces suggesting I was anti-development, analysis claiming I was harming my people, commentary predicting Burkina Faso would fall behind, everything designed to pressure me into changing course. But I didn't change course, because I knew the alternative was worse. Because the alternative is worse. The alternative is signing agreements you don't understand, implementing systems you don't control, creating dependencies you can't escape, surrendering sovereignty you can't recover. I've watched other African leaders sign these agreements. I've seen what happened after. I've observed the trap closing. I've witnessed the sovereignty disappearing. I've documented the control increasing. They sign because they don't read carefully. They implement because they don't ask hard questions. They create dependencies because they don't understand the terms. They surrender sovereignty because they don't see the trap until it's too late. And 3 years later, they regret it. They realize they can't exit. They understand they don't control their own systems. They recognize they surrendered sovereignty they can't recover. But by then it's too late. The trap is closed. The dependency is complete. The sovereignty is gone. 3 years from now, you'll either control your own digital infrastructure, or you'll be controlled by someone else's. You'll either own your citizens' data, or someone else will own it. You'll either have sovereignty or you'll have efficiency purchased at the price of independence. This is not theoretical. This is not hypothetical. This is not distant future. This is 3 years, 36 months, 1 presidential term, 1 budget cycle, 1 implementation period. 3 years from now, either you built your own system or you implemented theirs. Either you trained your own engineers or you hired their experts. Either you installed your own servers or you used their infrastructure. Either you wrote your own code or you licensed their software. Either you control your own data or they control it. There is no middle ground. There is no compromise position. There is no having it both ways. You either have sovereignty or you don't. You either control your infrastructure or someone else does. You either own your data or someone else owns it. Choose sovereignty. Build your own system, like we did in Burkina Faso. It's possible. It's achievable. It's better. We hired Burkinabe engineers. We trained them ourselves. We taught them sovereign technology principles. We showed them how to build systems that serve citizens instead of surveilling them. We created capacity instead of importing dependency. We built our own data centers, on Burkinabe soil, under Burkinabe control, subject to Burkinabe law. We installed our own servers. We established our own security. We created our own infrastructure. We own it. We control it. We can shut it down if we choose. We wrote our own code, open source where possible, proprietary where necessary, but always owned by us, always controlled by us, always serving our interests. We didn't license their software. We didn't adopt their platforms. We didn't implement their systems. We built our own. And it works. 5 million citizens enrolled voluntarily. 0 data breaches. 0 unauthorized access. Complete sovereignty. Total control. Absolute ownership. It cost money, significant money, money we could have spent on other priorities, but we made the investment because sovereignty has a price, and we chose to pay it instead of surrendering it. It took time, more time than implementing their system, more time than accepting their equipment, more time than deploying their experts. But we took the time because independence requires patience, and we chose to build slowly rather than surrender quickly. It required sacrifice, economic pressure we endured, diplomatic isolation we accepted, international criticism we faced. But we made the sacrifice because freedom demands it, and we chose sovereignty over approval. We are Burkina Faso, we are Africa, and we are not your lab rat.
I hope you're living your best life, too. And that you can't forget the nightmares. Can beat them. So, what are we doing here again? I'm not sure. It's certainly not near any battlefields I'm aware of. If we can have your attention for a moment, Chief Maybe will now explain. Maybe? Yep, I'm the one that recommended this destination to the captain. Please don't tell me we're getting roped into one of your obsessions. Oh, don't worry, I promise it'll be worth the precious time of the J Crews, champions of the world in its time of peril. Now, what do you know about ancient civilizations? Take a guess. You mean the kind that died out, right? In novels and shows and stuff, they usually have a technology way more advanced than what we have today. We're not talking fiction here. A number of ruins of such civilizations actually exist in real life. And you're saying something like that is here? Also, yes, advanced technology civilizations do exist in our world, real life. We did figure out some of their technologies, though. We just need to actually implement them instead of being stupid. Limestone, moldable limestone clay, if I remember correctly, is one of them. Anyways, precisely. I used to be a lot more into this sort of thing, and I even did some independent research of my own. And now that we're conveniently on an official world trip, I asked the captain if we could humor some of my hunches. So we are out here chasing your hobbies. Not at all. It could turn up some interesting tech, or maybe even some usable parts. That means it'll improve our firepower and help us fight for peace, liberty, and the good stuff. I'd say that's worth looking into. Alright, fine. We'll join your little digs. Unknowns detected. Those unknowns are now here too. That's a sure sign that there's something here. Captain, the recon team is moving in a squad of 3. They can't take on all those enemies with just 3 units, and we can't very well abandon them. The classic trio. Mazinger, Combattler, and Psybaster. I just wish Getter would. 3 minutes! What? Fuck, so I'm gonna have to reload? This unit's totally used to it. 3 turns though, it's fucking ridiculous.
で帰れると思うなよ。どこ見たんだ。隙だらけだぜ。
Boy, it's just a scratch.
ポンコツ野郎が人間様に勝てるかよ。アトロニックマどんどんかかってきやがれ。
でも集中攻撃は強引だにゃ。
好きにさせるか。全エネルギーを集中。
フライヤー指数変態値突破。いけるぜまさき。
これで終わりだ。コスモノバ。
まさき敵が来るにゃ。
ああ、わかったぜ。いけサイフラッシュ。こいつをただの量産型と思うなよ。ブリストファイヤー。
Good work, team. I finished up my analysis while you were fighting. And this is some good stuff, definitely worth the risk. Power part Mega Booster acquired. I've done some poking around and it looks like there might be similar tech near Yangon in Asia. Captain, would you mind if we made a stop there next time if we have a chance? Of course, anything that will help the jig. When the time comes, I'll be counting on you again, team. And now I have over-leveled my characters. Crap. Ice Drager has reached its destination. This is where Chief Mavie asked us to go. We're supposed to find something here that will lead us to a relic of an ancient civilization. Stay alert, the enemy may attack at any time. Based on Chief Mavie's analysis, it should be around here. Unknowns detected. Those unknowns are here now too. That's a sure sign that there's something here. Recon Team A is about to reach the target point. There aren't too many enemies. I'm sure they can handle it. Hold on, XO. Don't you think there's something off about their behavior? In fact, their synchronicity seems outright abnormal. You were right, Captain. According to our scans, those 7 units seem to be running some kind of link system. In order to break their link, the enemy units must be taken down consecutively in a short amount of time. How am I leveling up so dang fast? I'm happy-ish, but... Wait. This feels like I'm throwing him into a puzzle robo that just mega super levels up whoever I throw at it.
戦いを教えてやる。
まさき敵が来るにゃ。
ああ、わかったぜ。魔法剣エーテルちゃぶ台返し。笑わせんな。そんな腕で勝負するつもりかよ。
Yes! Now remember to EX action each time, Chris. Gotta go. Be back in a while.